My name is Tennyson E. Stead. I am a working screenwriter. I am a working script doctor, and welcome to The Right Stuff. This is going to be lesson 2 of our 5-week course on writing the pilot episode and the show Bible for your 30-minute comedy or animation series. And today we're going to start actually writing Act 1 of the pilot. Last week, we came up with an action to define the work of the protagonist in every single act of the pilot episode. So we know what the protagonist needs to achieve by the end of Act 1. The beginning of Act 1 is going to be the very, very first thing your protagonist does to set their big, huge series goal in motion. The first thing they do to actually push themselves along this path. But before we get into the scene list and figuring out how to get from the beginning to the end of Act 1, I want to talk about one of the don'ts of writing comedy. Probably the biggest mistake that screenwriters will make in either an animation or a comedy episode is the mistake of trying to create a compare and contrast and to sell the absurdism of the show through that contrast. So it's very typical, for example, to have Act 1 of a comedy, whether it's an animated series or whether it's a sitcom, to have Act 1 be kind of a status report on the everyday life of the protagonist. And we just go through the motions of living with that protagonist. And at the end of Act 1, the screenwriter is going to throw some piece of happenstance, some coincidence, some event into the show that will change the protagonist's life forever. The crazy roommate moves in, right? Or all of a sudden, if it's an animated show, the whole world is underwater, or whatever. Something happens. And then Act 2 is the protagonist trying to muddle through the status quo of their life under these new circumstances. I am begging you not to do this. It feels dead in the scene work. Those shows may tease your imagination. The situation may be appealing in the sense that you can imagine a lot of funny things happening. You could write a good show based on that pilot episode, theoretically, but that pilot episode is never as funny as the show in your mind, and that's what we're trying to avoid here. We want the show to be funnier than what the audience is coming up with on their own. So instead, we're going to lean into what we talked about during the last lesson. We're going to count on the absurdism of the efforts of the protagonists themselves to drive the show. So we have a goal for the end of Act 1. And we know what the protagonist is trying to achieve overall. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is the very first thing that they do to move this goal forward? When is the moment when they stop thinking about whatever it is that they're going to achieve and start actually trying to make this ridiculous thing happen? We're going to start the show 20 seconds after that moment. We don't actually need to see them have the realization of, oh, I'm a gopher and I should run for president. We don't need to have the nerd staring starry-eyed at the bully thinking, I should be friends with this person. Because it's going to be obvious that they want to be friends with this person when we see how hard they're trying to do it. You don't need to sell that. If you try to sell things to the audience, you're not funny. Salespeople are not funny. We hate being locked in a room with salespeople. Don't do it to your audience. Instead, focus on the efforts of the protagonist to achieve the goal. So you know now the first moment they're really investing that effort in achieving their goal, and you know what they've achieved at the end of Act 1. Make a list of all the things they need to do to get from that first fundamental effort to having achieved the thing that they need to achieve at the end of Act 1. And I want you to understand something here. Comedy shows and animation shows, because of the production strains that we've talked about in the past, they need to be 22 to 25 minutes long. This show is 22 to 25 pages long. You have less than 10 pages per act, which means each of these things that your protagonist is going to do to move this goal forward, they need to be decisive. And the more decisive they are, the more the absurdism of what they're trying to accomplish is going to stand out. What they're trying to do is ridiculous. What they're trying to do is stupid. They shouldn't be doing it. Don't shy away from that. Don't ease into it. Let the protagonist put everything on the field to make this goal happen. And make them keep pushing until some version of success presents itself. And you're going to wind up with some really stupid scene work. So the other thing that we need to talk about here is, what is scene work? Okay, how does a scene actually function? We've just made a list of all the things that your protagonist needs to do to move their goal from their first fundamental lever to achieve the big picture of what they're trying to achieve to the point where they've actually succeeded in doing what they need to do in Act 1. Okay? Each of those things is a scene. So, every scene is about your protagonist doing that smaller thing. You begin each individual scene with the first efforts of your protagonist to achieve whatever this smaller goal is that they're trying to achieve in the scene. And it's their job as a protagonist to make that goal happen by any means necessary. Typically, a scene ends the moment the protagonist either succeeds in their goal or realizes that they're not going to succeed in their goal and has to look elsewhere. As soon as the effort ends, the scene ends. But in this particular case, your protagonist does not have a lot of time on screen. So they've got to take personal responsibility for pushing this thing across the finish line in any possible shape. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be good. In fact, your protagonist is pretty much guaranteed to do everything wrong because they don't know what they're doing and they're horrifically ill-equipped and they're just trying anyway, as hard as they possibly can. That effort wouldn't be absurd if it was correct. So don't worry about letting it be correct. Just let the protagonist push so hard that they make something happen and then move on. That's the structure of a scene. So you're going to make a list of all the things that your protagonist needs to do to achieve the goal that they're setting out to achieve in Act 1. And then you're going to write each individual scene in that list, beginning and ending with the efforts of the protagonist. Our next episode is going to get you through the work of writing Act 2 of your pilot episode. And I guess the last thing to say is thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And happy writing. I'll see you next week. This has been The Right Stuff with Tennyson E. Stead. I look forward to learning with you.